Thanks for joining me for another Airbrush Asylum video. In this video, I'm going to show you how to pull apart and reassemble the Iwata CM-C+ Micron, and I'm going to be doing it using the Iwata Maintenance Toolkit. Let's get into it right now. So first little tip when pulling apart your airbrush is that I recommend you go get yourself one of these Iwata cleaning mats. They are fantastic because they avoid you losing your parts and the parts will not roll away, which is great. I'm not going to use it for this video, even though I always use it when I pull apart my airbrush. Reason being is, as you can see, it's very well worn. So let's get rid of that. I'm going to show you how to do it here on the nice clean bench. So a couple of the tools we need to grab out of the toolkit. We need the multi-grips, and these are great because they've got the Teflon there to stop you damaging your micron. The nozzle wrench, super handy and highly recommended so that you don't snap the thread of your nozzle. The tool so that you can undo the plunger assembly area and remove your spring. And they have two tools to remove the needle packing. One is a 1.4, the other is a 1.2. So first thing I'm going to take off is the lid for the color cup, which this just pops off. It doesn't unscrew or screw back in. Then remove the locking nut on the rear of the handle. Then we can remove the handle. Then unscrew the needle locking nut, pull the needle out. And be careful when removing that needle. As you can see, it's extremely fine. The CM-C+ Micron has a 0.23mm needle nozzle setup, and it's very easy to damage, so be careful with that when you've removed it. Now going to unscrew this section. Remove the spring. And we can't fully remove the rocker assembly yet, as I also have to unscrew this part here. For this, I'm going to loosen it using the multi-grips, then unscrew. You want to try and unscrew as much as possible. See how dirty that is? So this is another reason why I want to pull it apart, give it a good clean. Take out the rocker assembly, and you can see that part leans up against the trigger, and now we can remove the trigger. Now the trigger doesn't just lift up to be removed. You need to lift it up a little bit, twist it, and then you can pull it out. You can see why, because it's got that little cross pin that holds it into place. Now I can remove this screw here to get to the needle packing. You might just be able to see it in there. I'm going to be using the 1.2mm tool to get in there, and it's just a matter of inserting it carefully, lining it up, and then you can just turn it until it slots in, and then carefully unwind it. So to prevent you from dropping the locking nut, tilt your airbrush vertically and just have that little nut resting on the tool and gradually lift the casing off, and you can see it's holding that nut into place so you don't drop it. Now before I take off the front air cap and head assembly, I'm going to remove the plunger assembly using this tool here. So those two prongs that you can see fit into those two spaces there. I'm just going to insert those prongs to remove it and loosen it. Now be careful because that spring's going to want to fly out. So if you keep your airbrush like that, you're going to prevent the spring from falling out, and that little screw stays within the prongs of the tool. And now carefully remove the spring. There's your spring. So this is obviously how you change it to a soft spring if you wish to. And then you've got your little plunger. You can just drop out like so. So you can also remove this lower section, which I'm going to do now. Give that a turn. And once it's loosened, you can see that's the rest of the plunger assembly. It's all been gutted now. And there's one little piece left in there, which we can pop out using our needle packing tool. And it's this little pin in here. So this is the little pin that sits just beneath your trigger. When you press down on the trigger, that presses down and obviously engages your plunger assembly, and that engages the air. So to remove that, just press down on it. You can see it just drops out, and that's it there. Okay, so now I've successfully removed all of the internals and all the rear of the handle, the plunger assembly, everything's been removed. Now I can go ahead and remove the air cap. So just carefully unscrew that. The needle's not in there anymore, so you don't have to worry about knocking it by accident. And this part, unscrew that. That exposes your tip or nozzle, whatever you like to call it. And this is where the nozzle wrench comes in handy. You can see that fits snugly over the front of the Iwata nozzle, and then you just twist it to loosen it and unscrew it. The good thing about this is when you put the nozzle back on, you've got less chance that you'll cross thread it or strip it by over tightening, which is quite common if you're using the wrenches that come with the airbrushes. So there's the fluid nozzle, which is a 0.23 on the Iwata CMC Plus. The CMB and the CMSB both have a 0.18 setup in the micron range. And the final piece to remove is this part of the head assembly. That's where the nozzle sits in. That's where your airflow comes through. You can see there's an O-ring in there as well. So I'm going to go ahead and remove this O-ring. Now, as part of your general cleaning and breakdown, you don't really need to do this. It's just that my O-ring is quite dirty. I'll get in there with an old needle, try not to damage it, pop it out. You can see it there. And the back of it definitely needs a clean, and there's quite a bit of build-up in around there as well. So I'll go ahead and give that all a good clean and show you how to put it all back together. If you want to see a video on how I clean my Iwata brush, it's not this exact model, it's covering the Eclipse, but same sort of procedure, then I'll pop that link in the description below and you can go check that video out as well. And if this is the first time watching one of our videos, then welcome. For all of our regular viewers, welcome back. I do hope that you're enjoying this video so far. If you are, give it the thumbs up, share it out, and let's build this airbrushing community together. And if you haven't already, consider subscribing, tap on that bell icon, and that'll notify you every time I put out new content. Okay, so now it's reassembly time. Start with the front of the brush. I'm going to put that O-ring back in, sit it in, and then I have to press it down with an old needle, pushing it back into the cavity, make sure it's snug. Then attach the head assembly, again finger tight to start with, and then tighten her up. Then the nozzle, again if you've got the nozzle wrench, it's leaving the thread exposed like so. Sit that over the nozzle to reinsert it, and it's much easier to just slot it into place. Find the thread, just carefully, don't force it. Don't want to cross thread it, tighten it up. There you have it, nozzle back on the housing. Fit this back over the top and screw that on. Then the needle cap or air cap, and then we'll go fit the plunger assembly. First thing I need to do is drop this pin back in. So this is the tricky part. I'm going to use a pair of these wet paint tweezers, pick it up, just see the hole there, to drop it in there. So you can see it sitting back in there. You can also check underneath and you see that it's fitted correctly. You have this part, so that'll screw on the bottom like so. Then we can go ahead and fit the plunger assembly. Now you can see one side's long, one side short. It's the shorter side that goes in first. Pop that in like so, and then the spring, pop that over the top. And it can sit like that, that's not a problem for the moment. At least it's safe, the spring's not going to drop out on you. And grabbing this little guy, I'm going to sit it on this tool again so you don't drop it. You need to line up the hole so that that part of the plunger assembly sits through, and you'll feel the spring wanting to bounce back out. That's normal. I kind of go anti-clockwise first to get the to catch the thread, and then screw it in from there. You'll feel once it's grabbed, be able to screw it all the way in, and it'll look something like that. Now before we drop the trigger in, I need to put the packing back in. This needle packing screw, because otherwise we can't get into this area as easily. Using the 1.2mm tool, slide that tool into the screw and guide that back in through until you catch the thread, and then start screwing that in. Now go all the way tight, but you don't want to leave it like that because then you won't be able to get the needle in and out. I go about a quarter turn and find that that works really well. You can just adjust it as you need be. Now trigger, that notch goes towards the back of the airbrush. So insert it, then twist, then press down, and this is where you'll know if you've done the plunger assembly correctly, if you've got that action. If you press down and it just sits there, then you know that you've done this step wrong, so you'll have to go back and do that again. Now, rocker assembly, this part goes up against the trigger, like so. See, it slides up like that. Okay, then we need to insert this part here. So that sleeve goes in first, and then screws in. And then we need to put in the spring, and then screw this back on like so. Now you can go a fair way in. If you like, go right in, and I'll just show you that. Look how tight the throw on that trigger is. So what this does is it'll loosen that spring and therefore adjust your trigger tension. So I'll have it wound out quite a lot. I like a loose trigger, I don't like it too tight. There'll be a point where you can't go any further, so that's almost max. But you can see that's got a nice throw. but set it to whatever tension you prefer. The locking nut, just put it on loose. You don't need to tighten it yet, because then if you tighten it, you won't be able to get the needle in. And then reinserting the needle very, very carefully. Push it through. Should go all the way through with no resistance. So you should have been able to get through this section perfectly. If for some reason it got stuck here, then you know that that locking nut's too tight, so you might have to readjust that, but that's gone through nicely. And then make sure you tighten the needle locking nut, and then you can pull back. You can see that needle's traveling. If you want to double check, unscrew the nozzle, and you should see that needle moving like so. If you've reassembled it and you're pulling back on the trigger like this and the needle's not moving and there's no paint coming out when you're trying to airbrush, you know that it'll be this locking nut. What's happening is you've forgotten to tighten it, therefore that rocker assembly is moving, however the needle is not. When the needle isn't moving, it doesn't allow for paint to come out. So you need to tighten that every time you reassemble your brush, and you can see now that needle is moving back and forth, allowing the paint to go through the nozzle. The handle, now that you have the cutaway handle on the Micron, now the benefit of that is if you want to blast out any blockages, you can press down on the trigger and pull back, and it'll give you full throttle paint and dislodge any blockages. Plus it also makes it easier. You can actually take that needle out without undoing the handle. I never do that. And this is the guide for how far that trigger can pull back. So if you want to set it at a particular amount, you can. You can see here I've wound that dial in and now I can't pull the trigger all the way back. Whereas if I wind that dial out, I can get full double action control. That's how I like to airbrush. And the other cool thing with the Microns, or the new ones for that matter, is that the air cap or needle cap can actually screw into the back of that adjusting screw so you don't lose it when you're airbrushing. Put the lid back on. So just a quick video showing you how to pull apart and reassemble the Iwata Micron. I hope you found this video helpful. To continue your learning, be sure to check out some of the other videos and playlists that I've got listed here. And until next time, go grab your airbrush, do some amazing artwork yourself, and I'll see you again very, very soon in the next video. Thanks for watching. Bye for now.